at NASCC, the Steel Conference in Charlotte, and across from me is Cliff Schwinger, who is a senior structural engineer with the Harman Group, now known as IMEG. And he is one of this year's Lifetime Achievement Award winners. He's receiving the award for his contributions to the development of AISC's Steel Construction Manual, as well as his work in advancing the understanding of high-quality structural steel engineering drawings, delegated connection design, and quality assurance, as well as his dedicated service to AISC. So thank you for being here, Cliff. Let's, since we're at NASCC, I always like to ask folks, and especially since you've got a career of more than 40 years, how many steel conferences have you been to?
I never counted them. I think I've been to maybe about 15 or 16 maybe, but that's just purely a guess.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was curious, have any of them stuck out, or are they all kind of just blend together?
No,
at this point?
everyone's great. Everyone's memorable. I always try to learn whenever I attend a session. My goal is to always learn one thing that I can take back to the office.
Right.
And if I learn one thing in a 1-hour presentation, that was an hour well spent. So that's But they're all great. I mean, I love the one in New Orleans years ago when the party was held at some. I think the costume warehouse where
Yes.
they stored all the costumes.
Yeah,
And the president of AISC came in all dressed up in a Mardi Gras costume. That was a lot of fun.
That was my first one, and I was trying to remember where the conference dinner
Yeah.
was, and it was that was wild. It was like a warehouse that they would store all the Mardi Gras floats, like implements. That was amazing. That was a good one. Yeah, that was my first one. Well, that's great to hear. And it's a very good point about the presentations. I mean, I don't think most of us have photographic memories. So if you can just find one thing to hold on to from a presentation, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's great about AISC is they're all recorded.
Yes.
And all that stuff's available. What a treasure trove of knowledge that if you just find where it is on the AISC website, and you can do searches by speaker, topic, and it's a great training tool. Our young engineers, we're always looking at how can we further educate our younger engineers. And here's this AISC website with like 1,000 or so, papers, presentations, videos, recorded webinars, and it's just a huge, really fantastic resource.
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for mentioning that. We always like to publicize that as much as possible. Speaking of which, you mentioned that you, when we were talking earlier, you gave a presentation already this morning.
Yes.
What was that on?
The presentation this morning dealt with changes that are occurring in the specification and the code of standard practice regarding information that engineers have to show on their contract documents, their design documents. And that's changed, so you have to let all the engineers know, okay, this is what you did 5 years ago, but now you got to do this, this, and this. And they're basically trying to tighten up the information that engineers have to put on their drawings so that everybody is producing higher quality drawings, and so that contractors are all bidding on a level playing field. You don't want to have one engineer providing all the information and another engineer providing half of the information. The engineer providing half the information is probably going to have bids that are all over the place. Right. Which is going to lead to RFIs, arguments, change orders. And I always say, if I liked arguments, I would have been an attorney. But I don't like arguments. I like helping to produce high-quality contract documents. Right. That's basically what my role has been over the years at the Harman Group. I was the quality assurance manager. Now that we've merged with IMEG Corporation, I'm still doing a lot of quality assurance reviews, but I'm not the sole quality assurance person now. Right. But it's an exciting transition going from a company with 35 people to a company with over 2,000 and over 350 structural engineers all over the country. So it's interesting meeting these people and learning how everybody's doing things slightly different in different parts of the country. And we're trying to unify the way we're doing things so that we have like one standard. Right. The right standard, hopefully.
Right. The most comprehensive one, that has all the information, you said.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was quite the size difference between Harman Group and IMEG.
Oh, yeah. We're one of about 17 structural teams that are part of IMEG, so it's a growing company. But anyhow, I had a lot of positive feedback from this morning's presentation when I was downstairs getting lunch. people were coming up to me, mostly contractors.
Okay, yeah.
Because basically what I was doing, I was pointing out the things that engineers are not showing on their drawings. And the thing is, it's in everybody's best interest if everybody's producing higher quality drawings.
Right.
Because one thing, it takes more time to produce high quality drawings. So somebody who isn't aware of what they need to put on the contract documents, they're going to get it done in half the time.
Right.
Because they're leaving half the information off. So, to me, structural engineering, at least in my role, it's all about the connections. Because, we have this software that creates these incredible models where you can model thousands of members and create these really impressive looking 3D finite element analysis screenshots. But there's nothing showing how the members connect together. You're only halfway done. You're less than halfway done.
Right.
Before you look at the connections. So that's the tough nut to crack. And that's one of the things when we train our young engineers, we train them on the importance of connections and connection design and paying attention to details.
Right.
And following the loads. Yeah.
Right, especially when they're young, I'm sure they can visualize like the members, the beams and columns and the members themselves. But like you said, I mean, it's like, how do they come together?
Right, and they didn't learn that in school. Usually, I think they're mostly learning analysis. They're learning the fundamentals. They're learning the background that they're going to need to build on when they get into the working world. I'm surprised, speaking of connections, I always ask our young engineers if they recognize this connection. And I show them a screenshot, I show them an image of the Hyatt Regency Skywalk hangar that when it collapsed in 1981. Yeah. And it killed 114 people because they didn't pay sufficient attention to the connection. And the thing is, whenever a new code standard practice comes out, whenever there's something else that's developed, I always say, how's this going to help prevent another tragedy like that? And it usually does. You can see, if they had that in the late 70s, maybe that tragedy wouldn't have happened. But AISC is always refining things to help engineers, to help everybody, to help the whole team put together better designs.
Right. So. Very true. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that project in a long time, but that's right. It's one of those learning opportunities that you wish you never had to learn kind of situations.
Yeah. Well, they say you learn best from your mistakes,
right.
But you learn best from the mistakes of others. And so...
that's well stated.
Yeah.
Well, so you've been in the industry for how long now? 40?
Since 1976.
Okay.
So,
Don't make me do quick math.
Yeah,
so that's
like
more than 40 years, though.
More than 46 years.
More than, wow.
The first couple of years I was working for a company that designed equipment for sewage treatment plants.
Okay.
So I actually learned a whole lot about steel detailing. I sat next to a retired Bethlehem Steel detailer. He worked for Bethlehem Steel since World War II.
Okay.
And he taught me all about steel detailing, and it was just a fantastic learning experience. And he taught me how to draw welds, how to call out member sizes, everything. And so that was really a great opportunity. But then I wanted to get into building design.
Sure.
So I, left there after a couple of years, wandered around to a couple of different consulting firms, and then wound up at the Harman Group, which they did everything right. And so I stayed there, and I've been there ever since, and now we're part of IMEG.
Okay. So how long have you been at the Harman Group then?
Going on 37 years.
37 years. Yeah. Wow, that's a good tenure at a company.
Well, sometimes I look at some of the younger engineers, I'm thinking, geez, I've been at the Harman Group longer than this person's been on the earth.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, I suppose. Well, so how did what got you interested in engineering in the first place? Was this like a childhood dream? I hear so many different stories.
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. I lived and breathed airplanes. I watched every NASA launch. I recorded Apollo 11 when they took off. But then to the late 60s, I heard they were starting to wind down the Apollo program, and I heard about layoffs in the aerospace industry. But I liked engineering, and I liked putting things together, and I built model airplanes.
Okay.
And building model airplanes, if I could say anything, if all kids should have the opportunity to build balsa model airplanes. These are simple stick-built model airplanes. I learned about velocity, acceleration, center of gravity. I learned about trusses, cantilevers. I learned about joints, the importance of solid connections in joints. And I didn't know I was learning any of this stuff. I was a little kid. And I learned all this stuff before I had any physics classes. And I learned as much building model airplanes as I learned in any of my structural engineering courses when I went to college. But it was all this, the more subtle stuff, how things go together. You know, you build a fuselage on an airplane and it's torsionally stiff. You build a wing and it's got a cantilever, and then you learn the importance of efficiency of design, because if you make an airplane too heavy, it won't fly.
Right.
And so that's how I've always had this fascination for anything that flew. I never had a pilot's license, and I really don't have any desire to, but I love building model airplanes, and that's sort of, I wound my way into civil engineering, and I went to Lehigh University. And I had no idea when I was at Lehigh, a lot of the research was going on then on LRFD design, apparently. And I was completely clueless as an undergrad. But they had this really incredible laboratory, Fritz Lab. And I had some of my professors they were the greatest teachers. There was one professor, Dr. Fisher, and he was so patient. He was such he's one of the reasons I became a structural engineer, Dr. John Fisher. And after I graduated, shortly after I graduated, there was an engineering news record that my first employer got every week. And one day, there's a copy of an ENR with Dr. Fisher's picture on the front cover. He was like the engineer of the year.
Oh my.
I go, wait, that's Professor Fisher. And I had no idea he was such a giant in the industry. He was just a good teacher.
Did you have him autograph it?
No.
That's pretty impressive.
But he's one of the teachers. I told him years later that he was one of the reasons I became a structural engineer. And there was like this look. I think all teachers sort of wonder if they'll ever have that conversation, that validation that, wow, I did do good. The student learned something, paid attention.
Right. I mean, more importantly than just getting like good grades, like that's probably the best. That's the best. The highest compliment you can pay a teacher. For them to know that they helped get you to where you are, and then to see you succeed where you are. That's pretty impressive. Well, very good. So that was undergrad. Did you go to graduate school?
No, the chair of the civil engineering department, he tried getting me to stay, but I just wanted to get out there and earn a paycheck. Just going to school for so many years, and so I always sort of wondered, well, I can always go back, but not now. I learned, basically it was on the job training. And what I learned was learning is a lifelong thing, and you're always learning. I'm even right now, the older I get, the more I realize how little I know. And it's just, I try to learn. I try to go to these conferences, attend the seminars, listen to people when they speak, which is actually, you can't take that for granted. Lots of times people, you got to really hear what they're saying and pick up, like I said, pick up that one tip that you can take back to the office and learn in any presentation that I attend. Well,
that's great to hear. I did want to say the airplane thing, that's pretty amazing that I like the idea of you're learning these things without actually realizing that you're learning them. And because if you're having fun doing it, you're not that part of you that is seeing it is education. That's not there because you're just enjoying what you're doing. Very good. When I was younger, I maybe put together a few planes and things like that. I put together a Millennium Falcon. From Star Wars with glue. It was very intimidating, but I took my time. I put the whole thing together, and I was very proud of myself. And then when we moved, I think it got broken, and I was kind of devastated.
Well, it was funny. I used to build these planes, and I was a member of this organization, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and they would have contests at various venues. And one of the places was a naval air station outside Philadelphia, Johnsville Naval Air Station. And it was an active air station. And we'd be flying planes, kids, adults, and then somebody with a loudspeaker would come along, clear off the field, we have a plane coming in for a landing, which this wouldn't fly today.
Oh my goodness, no.
And everybody would be on the side, and there'd be a fighter jet coming in for a landing, and then we go back to throwing our planes in the air.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like, like kids like throwing a football on the street. Oh, car's coming, move to the side,
same thing.
Except it's a plane.
A fighter jet.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
I think the safety protocols have changed since the 60s.
Just a touch, That's amazing though. I understand, quality, and you were saying earlier, quality assurance is a big part of your career now.
Yeah.
How did you fall into that
Yeah.
role? Did you actively look to get into that role?
Yeah, it's funny. I working for the Harmon Group, Kirk Harmon, who is the president of the Harmon Group, has always had a full-time quality assurance manager.
Okay.
Even when we were a small company with about a dozen people. And I think the reason he did that, he wanted to have somebody else looking over quality to free him up to grow the business. So he hired the first quality assurance manager, Kim Chalchevich. He was the QA manager for maybe about a dozen years.
Okay.
And I remember the first time he did a quality assurance review of one of my projects. He bled all over the drawings. And here I had 10 years experience. I'm there, how's this possible? All these mistakes, all these red marks.
Right.
But but they were all valid comments. And it came around at the end, I was hoping that he would catch everything. And then later on, when Kim eventually retired, Kirk asked me if I wanted to be the quality assurance manager. I said yes, because I was always focused on the details and the contract documents and putting together a good set of drawings. So I became the quality assurance manager, and that involved developing typical details, training the young engineers. The quality assurance review is really just a part of the quality assurance program. And the quality assurance review catches mistakes, but it also alerts firms as to where are the weaknesses in the QA program. There's training, there's a knowledge base, you have a library of 1,000 typical details, and all that stuff comes together to create our quality assurance program. And my goal has always been to eventually do a quality assurance review and have no red marks.
Right.
Well, the trouble is it's going in the opposite direction, because acceleration, the schedules are being accelerated, the software is getting more and more sophisticated, younger engineers are getting much greater responsibility earlier in their careers. It used to be, when I started out, you wouldn't think of giving a young engineer details to do until they had their PE license, PE or SE license. Now, with computerization of everything, that young engineer can do in 1 week what would have taken 6 months for 4 or 5 engineers to do by hand. So what's the engineer going to do it the second week if they did it in 1 week? And so the idea is they're taking on more responsibility. They're doing details. And so we have to train our engineers on doing how to put together good details. But that's a learning curve. You can't it's not just to follow this checklist and you'll be an expert detailer. And so part of my quality assurance review process involves picking up a lot of mistakes that slip by, and then it's a learning experience. We review everything with the engineer, and they learn from their mistakes, although their mistakes are caught before they go out.
Right.
And so that's how I guess bumbled my way into the quality assurance area of expertise, and it's been fun. I look at when I do a quality assurance review, I tell people sometimes it's like the children's magazine Highlights. My parents got me Highlights magazine when I was a kid.
Yep.
Every month there was a puzzle.
Okay.
I think it was called something like "What's Wrong," and you had to look at the puzzle, and you had to find like maybe there was a fish riding a bicycle, or a bird with a mustache, or something like that.
Right.
And so I was being trained to be a quality assurance reviewer. When I was reading Highlights magazine, I was looking for what's wrong with that picture. And so, that's just another thing I learned when I was a kid without even realizing I was learning.
Right. The model plans took care of the engineering, education. Highlights took care of the quality assurance portion. That's pretty great.
Yeah. And so that's just been fun. I never get tired of doing QA reviews. And, it's just because it's enjoyable. And you know what? You have to enjoy what you're doing. And that's true with any field. And whether you're a modeler, whether you're a detailer, whether you're a welder, I heard, welding is something that's always been on my bucket list. I've designed thousands of welds. I've never actually done a weld, except I've done a virtual weld at a previous steel conference. Lincoln Electric had a virtual welding machine.
Sure.
And yeah, I didn't do too good, but it was a lot of fun.
Those are, but people do that for welding training. I've
Yeah.
heard, I've seen the virtual machines. I've heard kind of different thoughts on those. One person said, I mean, I think people acknowledge that they're really good. They're a useful tool, but the one thing you're missing is, like, I've talked to welders who talk about how it's like, it's all the senses. It's the feel. Yeah. It's not, and not only just the look and the sound and everything, but it's actually the smell too. That kind of thing. But I've tried welding once. It was actually at a Steel Day event a few years ago, and my weld wasn't so great. It wasn't pretty. It was hard to get that touch just right to spark it and then go from there. Yeah. I did better with the oxygen torch cutting some steel plate. It wasn't a pretty cut either, but I did cut it. Yeah. But yeah. Well, maybe that's you're talking about lifelong learning. Maybe you could.
Oh yeah. Well, I attended a 4-hour welding seminar yesterday.
Okay.
And it was mostly related to bridge welding.
Okay.
But it's like, wow, that's involved. Mm-hmm. That's really involved. And I've just, like I said, it's probably 50% art, 50% science welding. Right. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like anything, it probably comes really naturally to some people and not so much to others. Yeah. I'm definitely in the latter group. So. Well, that's great. And since you've been, and I mean, we've talked about quality assurance and how you got into that, but just since you've been in the industry for 46 years now, you said. I'm curious, I'm sure you could talk a lot about how it's, excuse me, I'm sure you could talk a lot about how it's evolved over the years, but is there like one or two like big observations? I mean, besides, I guess, computers kind of speeding everything up so much.
That's probably it. The computers, because
they
have totally accelerated things. And I'd like to see a day when, I always tell our engineers, when you do a detail, mm-hmm. you should strive to make it a photo quality detail. Right. Now, we want to make a profit on our projects. We're not a Habitat for Humanity as far as when we do, so it's going to take more time to do a photo quality detail, but that should always be a goal. And mm-hmm. If you look at a set of drawings from, like literally, we had drawings from a building built in Philadelphia in 1895. Oh, wow. It was a steel frame building in the mm-hmm. early days of structural steel mm-hmm. construction. And we had these high quality scans made. And I haven't done it yet, but I want to frame one of the scans. I mean, mm-hmm. they were works of art. I mean, those drawings were beautiful works of art. Mm-hmm. And so I long for the days when the drawings the quality can maybe be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, But it's, you got to convey the necessary information. That's the number one goal. Mm-hmm. The number one goal. But to present it in a way that's legible, understandable, and looks good.
Right.
Sometimes I could look at a set of drawings. Sometimes, I used to look at a lot of drawings from other engineers when we would bid connection design projects. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at, I've seen great drawings and I've seen not so great drawings. And it's like, I have a lot of pride in the drawings that I do, in the details that I do. Mm-hmm. And there's no higher compliment that I can get than from a welder or from a fabricator saying, these guys got it figured out. They know, they put out the best drawings in the city. And so that makes me feel good when I get that kind of validation. So
sure. No, I can imagine that is rewarding.
Yeah.
Speaking of this city, I just wanted to ask, so I switched gears a little bit. Are you a Philadelphia native?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I lived in Philadelphia till my 30s. I moved literally across the street. I live in Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. It's like I could, if I golfed, I could hit a golf ball into the city. And I still, I ride my bike in the city all the time. Mm-hmm. I love the architecture. I love wandering Philadelphia. Sure. There's so many things you can see on a bicycle mm-hmm. that you don't see when you're driving in a car.
Absolutely.
And about 10 years ago, we started doing some facade inspection. We don't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was on the sides of a lot of buildings. And every old building I would get on, I would have to look up information about the building. Mm-hmm. And I learned about the fascinating history behind these hundreds of thousands of old buildings in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And they all need facade inspections if they're more than 75 feet tall. But you learn who the architects were, who the engineers were, mm-hmm. and you learn what was built in these buildings. And it's evolved. I enjoy riding bicycles, and I would give these tours of the city with the bike club I belong to, touring architectural landmarks.
Sure.
These aren't the well-known architectural landmarks, but the completely unknown architectural landmarks. Then I had another ride, sort of ties in with the speaker this morning talking about infrastructure. It was called Cliff's Decaying Infrastructure Ride. And we'd ride around the city.
I want to do this ride.
We'd look at buildings where stuff's falling off the building and bridges with holes in the beams. And, it's a general rule of thumb is you shouldn't have a hole in the web of a plate girder. And there's a lot of really decaying old bridges and buildings in Philadelphia, in all big cities.
Sure.
And it's the kind of stuff you don't notice until you read in the paper that a piece of terracotta fell and hit somebody in the head.
Right.
And but it's fascinating, but I love discovering old buildings and then going online and figuring out what was that building originally used for.
I do appreciate it. Thank you so much, Cliff.
If you're in Philadelphia, stop by and I'll give you a bike ride.
I would love to go on this tour. That sounds fantastic. You might even have like TV series built in here. I don't know.
Podcast.
There we go. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks again, Cliff, and congratulations on the award.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the show.